Last video, I was talking about some copywriting changes you can make if your cold email campaigns aren't working. And here are some data changes that you can make if your cold email campaigns aren't working. If this is your first video that you've ever seen of me, my name is Eric Noslavsky. I run an outbound agency called Growth Engine X, where we send 3 million cold emails a month on behalf of our customers. And last year, we generated over 10,000 positive replies. I think you could even say we generated over 15,000 positive replies on behalf of our customers. So I don't think that we're the greatest at cold email, but I think we know a little thing or two about cold email as well. And so when you're running a cold email campaign, there's three things you need to nail. One, your inbox infrastructure. Two, the list of people that you're sending to. And then three, the messaging that you're sending to that list. And so let's just put to the side, we think your inboxes are all set. You're using Smart Lead, you're using Instantly, your inbox deliverability is all fine. Now, there's two levers that you can pull on if your campaigns aren't working that well. One, you could change your copywriting. Go check out the video I just made called Chunking Up and Down, and then also my videos on a hypothesis on message market fit and those things to talk about some copywriting campaign strategy things. Now, when it comes to your list, a lot of times people come to us and they say, hey, I can email any person who owns a business with 10 to 50 employees and they're the owner. It's like, cool. Okay. There's four ways that you can think about breaking that list up that if just generally targeting CEOs with 10 to 50 employees in the United States doesn't get you the positive responses that you want, then there's four shifts that you can make, right? And so personally, I do like to start that broad when we're doing outbound campaigns, just because if we can nail the messaging that, a CEO at a company with 10 to 50 employees in the United States, for every 100 to 300 people we reach out to, we're getting a positive response. If the LTV of our customer is over $5,000, over $10,000, some kind of real B2B LTV, usually that math works out. And then now we're not going to accidentally run a campaign that's too small and then we don't know what to pivot. I like to start that broad just so that if we do hit something like that, the math is usually going to work out. So there's basically four ways that you can split up your campaigns that people talk about on LinkedIn all the time, but I just wanted to kind of add my own commentary and flair onto them. So you have your list. You can break them up by relevance. You can break them up by triggers. You can break them up into micro campaigns, and then you can break them up into your ICP scaled campaign, which is what we were just talking about. And so when I'm talking about relevance, I mean that you are scraping some kind of data point and using that data point to change your messaging to say something relevant in your message. Perfect example, for every 70 people we reach out to with this Google reputation management script, we're getting a positive response. And we say, question about review, subject line. Hey, I had a question about one of the reviews I saw online. The one about, and then we find a negative review, and then we say the one about, and then we AI generate whatever it's about, whatever summary it is, right? And so then we'll say, if you want to get these removed, you only pay to get them removed, blah, blah, blah. 1 out of 70 people respond to that. I would call that relevant messaging. We're not emailing every CEO with 10 to 50 employees in the United States with that messaging. It's only the ones who have negative reviews, who are the most likely to want to engage with us on these services, right? And I think the other thing that we put in is that their overall review is less than 3.5, so that we also have some people who, really have bad reviews and they're actually going to want to do something about it. Because if somebody has a 4.7, I'm not sure if they're really going to want to do something about that, right? And so that would just be relevance. That data just exists in the market and we could just be monitoring for that. And then another thing that we could do is we could have triggers. Let's take the same exact example. And so what we could be doing is we could have a list of 50,000, 10,000, 25,000, however many companies we want to be monitoring. And they could be great companies that we want to be monitoring for because they have lots of Google reviews. They have a 4.7 star rating, and they basically have no reviews. What we can do is we could use scheduled runs in Clay, and we can check every day, every 3 days, every week for a new negative review popping up recently. And then as soon as we find a new negative review, then we're reaching out immediately. Now, we've tried this in the past. This has a higher positive response rate than even the relevance one because the business owner saw it. They're kind of frantic about it. They're in a different bucket than the people who have like a below a 4.0 Google star rating, and they get that rating, the review, and they might want to do something about it immediately. Well, not even might. Our data proves that they wanted to do something about it immediately. And so now let's take it a step back because maybe we need some more examples. So if we're reaching out with relevance to people, right, and we're saying, hey, I saw you're using HubSpot, Built With told me that you're using HubSpot and you're using MailChimp. Are you having a tough time having them both integrate together? Whatever. Like you can use the technology to close the gap and say, hey, you're using both of these things. This is the problem that most people have when they're using both of those technologies because they don't talk to each other well. And then you have relevant messaging to be reaching out to them. Versus if you're monitoring everybody who's using HubSpot and then you on a daily basis figure out who is recently installing MailChimp, then boom, that's the trigger. And see how relevance and triggers can sound kind of the same, but it's a lot like the difference between an API and a webhook. An API, you're calling instantaneously and you're just seeing in this moment what's the data right now. And then with a webhook, you're waiting for that to come back. And so when you're setting up your trigger campaigns, you're waiting for that trigger to happen and you're setting up your systems to be monitoring it. So as soon as you see it, you can be reaching out to them as fast as you possibly can. And then there's other campaigns that I call micro campaigns, where this is oftentimes just taking your list and just cutting it a little bit more, right? So reaching out to CEOs who they have 10 to 50 employees in the United States, but you know what? That's a little bit big. I want to reach out to people who are only in New Jersey because I live in New Jersey and I just want to keep it to that. Is that relevance? No. Is there any trigger there? Not really. Where they live isn't that big of a difference, but the fact that I live there, people want to work with somebody who works locally, and we can break that campaign up and we can make it more of a micro campaign. This is borderline relevance and trigger, but you could also take people and only target people who have been in business for 10 years. You could take people who've only been in business less than 2 years, and you could do things like that as well too. And you're just taking your overall list and just filtering it down with some easier filters so you can speak to them a little bit more. Toes the line between relevance, but I think these days, if you're claiming something is using relevance and it's not using AI, then I don't really count it. And so then that would be a micro campaign. And then you could also, the fourth thing, like we were talking about, you could just have your ICP and then you could just scale your campaigns. And so I usually start with just the ICP scaled campaign. And if we don't get enough positive responses when we just email, like I said, CEOs with 10 to 50 employees in the United States, or even if somebody comes to us and they say they want to email founders with 10 employees to 200 employees, there's no way that a founder with 10 employees is having the same problems as a founder with 200 employees. There's just such a huge difference there. So that's a perfect example for a micro campaign where it's, from 10 to 30, we're going to be saying something different than from 30 to 75 and from 75 to 125. That's a perfect example for a micro campaign. Now, your relevance might be able to be the same relevance across everybody, right? You could be doing the reputation management thing and the relevance is all the same or the trigger is all the same. But when you like employee headcount is a perfect example of how you can make campaigns a little bit more micro and cut through the noise. And so, like I said at the beginning of this video, the whole point of this is I just wanted to share, if you're starting to run your outbound campaigns and you're not sure why something isn't working or you're trying to set up your first campaign, this is just a framework that we think about of, okay, you have your copywriting over here, but what can we do to our list to make it much more impactful? If we have a nice wide list, how can we be thinking about different things? Now, we didn't get into how to do the relevance of the triggers, but the rest of my YouTube channel covers a bunch of examples of how to AI generate different relevant triggers and all of these different things. And so check that out. This video, I just wanted to just think through that framework of if you're launching your first campaign, there's 4 ways to break up your list. And if you have launched your first campaign and it's not working, that's another 4 ways that you can break up your list too. So I hope you enjoy.